Mark, thank you for coming on the Easy Pray podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. Can you give the audience a little bit about a background about who you are and what you do?
So my name is Marc Evans. I am a fraud and financial crimes detective. So I've worked in law enforcement for the past almost 13 years now. And over the past 6 years, I've worked exclusively only on fraud and financial crimes. I'm also a certified fraud examiner and a training coordinator. So I do a lot of things when it comes to training individuals on how to combat and investigate fraud-related crimes. And then not too long ago, I started a business by the name of Fraud Hero because I saw throughout my work as a detective that there was more that needed to be done to help stop fraud and prevent people from being victims of fraud.
Cool. So, what got you into on the detective side, investigative side? What got you into fraud? Was it someone tapped your shoulder and said, "Hey, we want you to do this," or was it just a case that you got assigned that got interesting?
So for me, I was always passionate about dealing with fraud. I actually, before I even joined the department as an officer, I wanted to be a fraud detective. And that's not normal for people to hear.
No.
Every time I would say that, they're like, "Wait, you want to be a fraud detective? Not homicide or one of like they call it the sexy crimes, I
Yeah.
guess." Like no, like no, I love fraud. To me, I love puzzles,
Hmm.
and to me, fraud has always been like a puzzle because when you deal with a suspect or a criminal who's committing fraud, they're trying to one, hide who they are. They're trying to hide the methods that they use to commit the fraud. And for me, if I can figure out how they did it, I'm just passionate about. I love being able to figure it out and outsmart the smart people.
Yeah.
So that for me, it's always been a passion.
So, did you have a background in accounting as well?
No, so even like growing up, I never even thought I would work in law enforcement growing up. And it wasn't until probably right my freshman year of college. And I was like, you know what? I really love puzzles. Like, how can I give back? How can I do something? And honestly, I'll give it credit to, there's a TV show called White Collar.
Hmm.
And I started watching that and I go, that would be fun. Um, and at first I thought about going the federal route. And then I talked to some individuals who were like higher up in certain areas and like, you know what? I think maybe the local route would be really good. And I applied for my department and that was the goal from the beginning. I was taking classes before I even started on money laundering and credit cards before I even got on the department. So everyone's like, yep, that's exactly where Mark wanted to be.
That's cool that you got to be able to go right into what you wanted to do. And so, what got you interested in wanting to be a fraud detective anyway? Was it an incident? Was it like the TV? Was it just the TV show, or was there
Well,
some life incident as well?
well, it was a TV show, but I was also a victim of fraud before I got on, to the point where it almost stopped me from joining law enforcement. I had my identity stolen, and throughout my background process of hiring, I had to get, I was still learning a lot of stuff, and I checked my credit report. And I'm like, wait a minute, I don't recognize this account.
Oh,
And it was a delinquent account. I'm like, I don't have any delinquent accounts. I don't understand this. And I had to get that fixed before I can join the department and get
yeah.
through the hiring process. And I go, this would suck if the average person can't get the job of their dreams or what they want to do because somebody else is using their identity. And it was an entire process. And I go, there has to be something that can be done to help people. And that's what really drove me to go straight to fraud. And hey, I'm going to be there and I'm going to help other people not have this happen to them.
Did you ever find out how they got your information, or even who they were, or was it just always this kind of it's just
I don't
there
even
and I had to get rid of it?
know. I don't even know how they got it. And it wasn't something major. It was a utility company. It
Hmm.
was like a power bill, but it was in another state. So it was somehow they got my information. They opened up a power bill and my name, and they never paid it.
Oh,
So I had to, of course, contact that company. Look, I don't live there. I live, I live in the other side of the country. And they ended up fixing it and removing it, and then I had no issues after that. But it was being a victim and seeing that part of it helped me want to do more.
cool. So what are some interesting kind of what's the current state of fraud now in terms of the sort of cases that you're seeing and what people are doing?
So. I get to see all different kinds of cases. So I get to see credit cards, money laundering, embezzlement, um, you name anything that has to do with fraud. I've investigated real estate, you name it. But some of the bigger ones I'm seeing now are seeing a lot of social engineering tactics
Hmm.
and a lot of imposter scams. And I know a lot of times when we think about these social engineering cases that include things like phishing or smishing, baiting, and those kind of tactics, and then the imposter scams, where you think of something like a government or law enforcement imposter, a tech support imposter. But I was seeing them not internationally. Some, yes, but a lot of them were local.
Really?
And that's not something that, as a detective, you think of very often. Like, wait a minute, the people who are committing these are actually in the same jurisdiction that I am. And like, oh, this is going to be great for me to learn this process. And now I can help these people locally and actually bring them some justice because it's hard once, if it's something international, I can't go overseas and, get a criminal. But if it's local, there's something I can do about it. So I've seen a lot of imposter scams over the past couple of years.
Is there a particular more frequent type of entity they're impersonating?
The ones I'm seeing a lot of are bank imposters, where they are pretending to be either from the bank, bank employees, or the other one I'm seeing a lot of, I call it the CEO or supervisor imposter scam. Those two are pretty large. With the bank imposters, a lot of it occurs because people don't know that the way these scams are happening, that
Mhm.
they could actually happen that way. So I see a lot of phishing attacks through email. I see a lot of smishing attacks. I see a lot of text message phishing. And then the phishing, the phone calls. And when I talk to a lot of people who become victims of these, they go, I had no idea that someone could spoof a phone number
Yeah.
and make it appear as the bank is actually calling me. And we want to trust people. We trust that number that we see that pops up in caller ID. I'm like, yeah, it's the bank. They called me, said I had fraud on my account.
So with the fake, the impersonating the bank, are the people calling just saying I'm with quote unquote your bank, or have they somehow been able to figure out they have some information saying, oh, this person banks with Bank of America, so I'm going to pretend to be Bank of America.
They are being more specific now. It used to be more broad where they would just say there's a random bank and they would try to elicit the information out of the person to get them to say what bank they belong to. But now it's become a case where they'll call and they already know the banking information. They'll know they're from this financial institution or that one. And to the point to where they not only trick them into sending money like through a wire transfer, a lot of times through cryptocurrency like Bitcoin. I've seen some, and these have made the news lately, where they're actually sending couriers to pick up the person's debit or credit card. And this person who thinks the bank is, has this great service now, they'll come pick up your debit card and they'll cut it up for you and then they'll send you a new one, not realizing that the person who's picking up the card is a part of this criminal organization. Um, and what happens after the person, gives this courier their card, now their bank account starts having actual fraudulent transactions. And it's usually within a matter of like 30 minutes or so. And they're
Wow.
just emptying out their accounts. So those are really tough to deal with.
Um, in working with the banks, are the people usually able to get their money back relatively quick, or is it a pretty long-term process?
It depends on how long they take to file the report. So, and when it comes to fraud cases, especially the ones we deal with locally, it's a speed game. The faster you can get the report done, the easier it is, or the faster it is for us to try to recover those funds. And now, from a law enforcement perspective, we can help with contacting the bank and working with the banks to try to prove to them like, hey, this is an actual fraud case and this person was an actual victim. It wasn't an authorized transaction. Um, and once we talk to them, it's up to the bank to make that decision if they're going to do the refund or not. But at the same time, if we can get the person in custody fast enough, and go say, hey, look, the transaction is happening right now.
Hmm.
And they call us, say, hey, I just happened. Someone just took my credit card. The transactions are going. This is where they're happening. Great. Let's get on it. Maybe we can go find the person and get your money back. So it all depends on how fast. Now, if like a couple of weeks goes by and it's happened, there's a very, very slim to none chance that that money's going to come back.
Yeah, there was a friend of mine who he co-owned a small company, and they very seldom took money out of the company. And someone sent an email looking like him to the person who processed to the accountant, saying, "Hey, I'm switching banks. Can you update my update where you send payments?" And so she didn't catch it, because it was interesting because normally you hear from people, it's they're always throwing urgency in there. Hey, I need you to do this right now. It's super important. But this was actually the opposite. The scammer was, hey, it's not important. Just whenever you can get to it, I'd appreciate it. Um, if it doesn't happen on this payroll on the next run, that's fine, as long as it gets done later on. And
Yeah.
it turned out to be that they didn't send the money for like 3 months. She didn't need to send any money for
Oh,
like
wow.
3 or 4 months. And so what happened is when they sent the money, it just disappeared. And so he called me and he's like, "Hey, what should I do?" And I'm like, "Well, how long ago did this happen?" He's like, "Oh, this happened like within the last hour or two." And
Okay.
he said he had called his bank, and they were like, or the sending bank, and they were like, "Well, there's nothing we can do about it." And I'm like, "No, that's like two things you need to do: call back and talk to somebody else, like
Yes.
someone just saying, 'I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do,' and not even trying, like that's not acceptable. And then find out what bank the money was sent to and call their fraud department." And
Yeah.
he called back his bank, and they were still like, the second person he talked to was still really evasive, really, sir, it's the chances of us being able to do anything are really slim to none. I don't really think there's anything I could do. And he ended up hanging up on that person and calling the receiving bank, who said, "Oh, we see the transaction. We'll stop it immediately. While
Yeah.
you try to figure out while you get the sending bank to let us know." And it turns out that the recipient account had already been flagged for fraud and was already shut down.
Oh, see, and that's common. Like if the banks catch it, that's actually really good.
Yeah, because it had been so long since the initial scam had happened in terms of
Yeah.
switching the bank account. Apparently, there'd already been other money had already been sent to that bank account, and it was shut down. And then it was just a matter of like, "Okay, well, sir, you'll get your money back. You just have to wait for the process to play out now. That we need to reverse the transaction." And somehow, like,
Yeah.
reversing transactions always take way longer than sending the money.
Oh yeah.
When you send the money, like, it's out of your account in like 2 minutes. When you want to reverse a transaction, it's like 3 weeks.
Yes.
but
Yeah, you
but
go
but
from
he
instant transaction to
Yeah.
snail mail.
But he lucked out in that the account that it was going to had already been closed. But I think, I would hope that because he had contacted the bank so quickly to when the transaction had happened, that he might have been able to uh, get the account frozen before the money was withdrawn. How quickly do you normally see money withdrawn or moved out of the receiving bank on these sort of situations?
Oh, now if it's like a bank, like a wire transfer or peer-to-peer transfer,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that we see, I've seen money be transferred from one account to another account and taken out within a matter of 10 to 15 minutes.
Wow.
And that's just because the organized group is, and these normally happen with organized groups, and they're working already with other people. And sometimes the other people that they're working with are not actually criminals, they're non-willing participants or non-willing participants. They have no idea they're even a part of a scam. And I've seen some banks where the account holder will have the money, somehow they receive a phishing text. I'll give you a great example. They get a text message saying, "Hey, there's fraud on your account. Click this link in order to verify."
Yeah.
They click the link, takes them to a fake website, looks just like the real bank's website. Put in their credentials, the username, password, and then they can't log in. But they don't know they just gave over their information.
Yeah.
And within a matter of minutes, money's being transferred out of their account to another account, sometimes at the same bank. And then as soon as it hits that account, there's somebody either at an ATM or they're walking into the bank to take that money out as soon as it hits.
Wow.
And so I've seen it happen, like I said, within a matter of sometimes 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how organized the people are. Sometimes it'll go on over a day or two, but once it's out, and depending on how fast they contact law enforcement or they contact the bank, the money's gone. And the banks, a lot of times, and it's not on anything on them. It's just like, hey, this transaction was authorized. Like it came
Yeah.
from your account. It shows that you hit the button, you hit the wire, and then this person came and they withdrew the money. And sometimes I've dealt with that person and they're like, what are you talking about? I was just helping a friend who needed to get money because their account was frozen. That's usually what the
Yeah.
scammer will say. Their account's locked up. They don't have any way to get their money out. So they ask to transfer it to me. And I'm like, well, do you know the money that came from you actually is stolen from somebody else? And they're like, what are you talking about? And you need to give me that money back, or we need to, identify who the person was you gave the money to. So
do,
it could vary.
do you think that the person who withdraws the money really is unaware, or they
To a
really
degree,
they really know
some
what's going
no.
on, but that's just the excuse because they think that's going to work?
Yeah. Now I've seen both. Like most of the time they know. Like if someone's transferring tens of thousands of dollars into your account, that's a red flag. Like
Yeah.
you should know that, hey, this isn't normal for someone to do this. I've actually seen one person go to four different bank branches within a matter of an hour and a half and do four transactions for just under $10,000 because they're trying to beat the whole,
Yeah.
reporting system, not knowing that structuring is going to actually cause a SAR too. And but I've seen that happen. But I've also seen some where sometimes it's a kid who was maybe just turned 18 or 19, and somebody sent them a message on Instagram or TikTok or something and saying, hey, you want to make some extra money? I just need help with my account. And they fall for it. And like, hey, I'll give
Yeah.
you a couple $100 if you just help me use your account. I'm like, okay, great. I can go make some money and buy some new shoes. And then they get to the bank and the bank's like, this is fraudulent. And then we show up and they're like, wait, what's going on? But most of the time, I think they know that something's going on.
So, how often when you get a call from a bank saying, "Hey, we have uh, a fraudulent, there's a fraudulent transaction in process, and we have the person here, and we're kind of stalling," how quickly can you guys get out and
Ooh.
meet the person? I don't want to
It,
like. Obviously, if it's something you can't say, but like, are there times that you can actually make it out there while they're still in the bank?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It just depends on how fat or how busy we are. Because
Mhm.
if I'm working something else currently, it's not going to be
Yeah.
within a short time frame. Now, if it's something like, hey, you know what, you caught me in a moment, I'm free, I'm on the way right now. There's times I've definitely been able to get there quick enough. But if they've been doing the scam for a while, they know how long it takes for a typical transaction to happen,
Hmm.
and then they get spooked and they leave. A lot of times they leave the fake ID there because they're using a fake ID most of the time. So they'll leave the fake ID with their picture on it, which is great for us.
Whoops.
And they're like, wait a minute. But they know they have a limited time. They'll scoot really quick.
Yeah, I imagine the people who've been doing this for a while, they kind of know in the same way that the bank tellers know when something fishy is going on. The serial scammer knows when the bank teller is being fishy also.
Yeah, like if it's somebody who's new to the scam world, they may not catch on, but for someone who's been doing it for a while, they know exactly when someone is, taking their time and like, wait a minute, it doesn't take this long normally. And then they just leave
Mhm.
out of fear that, hey, that they know. And I mean, kudos to them for being smart on that end, but eventually and they still end up getting caught. Like I know people think like, oh, it's fraud, they can get away with it. Like, no, you can't hide forever. And eventually you're gonna get caught.
Yeah, if you walked into a bank and there's a camera, which there's probably
Yeah.
which is probably a camera in every bank, plenty that you don't see. Uh, I'm sure that like once you're on camera and they've got a photo, it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, and there's cameras everywhere, not even just in the bank. I mean, you walk outside, there's cameras everywhere. I think
Yeah,
every house probably has cameras on it by now, in every business. So there's always a camera somewhere.
I was just out shopping earlier, and the local shopping center now has license plate reader cameras at every entrance, every driveway has multiple license plate reader cameras. I'm like, okay, they're ready to catch people.
Well, it's because fraud is, I mean, for me in the fraud world, it's become so bad. Like I see the numbers. I'm like, this is the fastest growing crime I've ever seen. I know we talk a lot about like different, like there's robberies and burglaries,
Mhm.
but with fraud, a lot of criminals that now are weighing the risk versus reward. And they go, wait a minute, I can go, make a counterfeit check and get $10,000, or I can try to go, burglarize a house and get a TV and try to pawn it for a couple of $100. But what's going to get me, more time in jail?
Yeah,
Oh, as of right now, it's the breaking into someone's house and getting a TV or robbing someone.
yeah.
But if you're like, hey, it's only a check, it's a financial crime, no one got hurt, and no, somebody got hurt because someone lost their money, and maybe someone can't, pay their bills this month, or someone can't pay for school or whatever it may be, and it actually, I mean, it hurts people in the long run, and some people don't think about that.
Are you starting to see the prosecutors being more aggressive in pursuing, like trying to, I don't want to say like trump up charges, but trying to push for legislation or push for charges that will result in longer jail time?
Yeah, because I think it became more of a fact of understanding how fraud works. And from a prosecutor side, I deal a lot with, the DA's office,
Mhm.
and a, a lot of times they see these fraud cases and they go, I don't understand this. Help me out. And so one thing as a detective, what I get to do is one, I get to handle the entire case. And as part of handling the entire case, I have to know what happened on the victim's behalf, what happened with the bank. I have to understand and be able to explain and articulate exactly how it
Mhm.
happened to give to the district attorney. And then I have to be sometimes testify, explain to a jury or a judge, hey, this is how it how it happens. So now that more attorneys are starting to learn not only the effects of it, but how they actually happen. Yeah, we've gotten a lot of legislation, like in my state. One of the things that we pushed a couple of years ago was mail theft.
Mhm.
Because usually a mail theft was a federal charge.
Yeah.
And a lot of mail theft goes hand in hand with fraud. Like if you're stealing mail, you're committing fraud. That's just just how it works.
It's the only reason why you're stealing mail.
Yeah, you're looking for checks, you're looking for credit cards, for IDs. And so our legislation got on board, and a couple of years ago, they actually made mail theft a state and local charge. So with sometimes manpower at the federal level, they don't have the manpower to handle every single
Yeah.
case that comes their way. So like, hey, we can now move forward with mail cases at our level, and our district attorneys can understand, like, hey, this is a big problem. And they see it on the news all the time, but they never understood it. And they're like, wait, I think one question I would always get is, how are they getting into the mailboxes?
Yeah.
And I would say there's multiple ways. They're either breaking into it, like they with a crowbar, old
Mhm.
school way. They use a legitimate key that they either bought from another criminal, or they stole from, a mail carrier, or they're making a counterfeit key and they're using that to get into the mailbox. And it takes a matter of a minute, 30 seconds to a minute to clean out the entire mailbox. Like if you have a community mailbox.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the prosecutors will go, well, how does that correlate with fraud? And then I will explain, well, what do you get in the mail? Bank statements, credit cards, IDs. And then they go use it. And before you know it, your credit card is being used. And you're like, wait a minute, I have my credit card in my wallet.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, well, the new one the bank sent you is not in your wallet. So someone's out using it.
Are,
Um, so
are,
it's learning
are,
there.
are you starting to see people like the scammers? And this is just kind of me thinking through, and I've seen it in other areas where they are now, I'm going to pretend to be the person, get a new credit card issued, have it sent, and so me as a consumer, I didn't even know that request was made, and so therefore I
Hmm.
don't even know the card was even issued because they intercepted mail twice, once to figure out my account number, and the second time when a card was sent. Are you starting to see stuff like that as well?
Not so much as far as they'll intercept it. I'll see it in different ways. So not like the intercepting the mail. I've seen the change of mail address.
Okay, yeah.
So I mean, I guess there's a way of intercepting mail, just in a different manner. But I've seen that where they'll just, they'll go online and just changed the person's address, and then all of a sudden, like, wait a minute, I'm not receiving any. I haven't received mail in a week. Something's going on. But they didn't know that a new card was coming. And I've seen some where they're like, no, I don't even use that card. That card is linked to an account that I have with, XYZ business, and it's in a box in my room.
Yeah.
And they go, well, were you expecting a new credit card? And you're like, you know what? I don't know. Let me check. And this is where like something like informed delivery would come in handy.
Yep.
And they'll check informed delivery and they're like, wait a minute, I was supposed to receive a credit card from them. I'm like, well, when were you supposed to receive it? Well, yesterday. When did somebody use your credit card? This morning. Like, your credit card was taken out of the mailbox.
Yep.
And so I've seen it that way. Or I've seen like if your mail got delivered somewhere else and you need to contact, the postal inspector and see who's forwarding your mail or where it's going.
Yep. I'm a big fan of the informed delivery. I've got that set up for me. That way I know. And you can even do it for like UPS and FedEx will do that as
Yep.
well. So even if you don't know, like occasionally I'll get an email saying, "Hey, your package is scheduled to arrive in 2 days," and I'm like, "I didn't order anything." "Hey, honey, did you order something?"
Yeah.
She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay, well, it'll be here in 2 days." But I think it's important to kind of know when you're
Mhm.
expecting stuff because if you're expecting mail, even if it wasn't something that you ordered, if you know that something's coming, you can be there to pick it up and make sure that it gets to where it's supposed to be, or your family member who needs it.
Yeah, I'll sign up for all those services. The same thing with the UPS and FedEx, because I want to know, like, it's like just like you said, if I didn't order something, but somebody say is sending me a gift, at
Yep.
least I know that, oh, I should be expecting a package from UPS on this date around this time, and I don't have like a porch pirate or someone waiting in front of my house or and waiting. Or if I get that random text message, everybody gets them. I probably have a whole folder of them.
Yep.
USPS, hey, you didn't receive your package today. It's at the warehouse, and click this link. And like, I think I'll probably be getting one of those at least every other day. So
Yeah, those and you didn't pay the toll for the toll road.
I saw
Uh,
those recently. Yeah.
and we've got a refund for you on your latest purchase, even though they won't say who they're supposedly representing.
Oh, some of those are some of those are really good. I've had the phone calls a lot too, and I kind of have fun with the phone calls.
Yeah,
So I think I had one scammer that I convinced that I was a scammer too.
nice.
I just told him, he started talking. I go, you know what? Your script is not that great. If you really want to work on that script and you really want to make some money, let's start working together. And he's like, wait, what? And I go, dude, I got a better script for you. And it's funny. I was actually at a fraud conference when that happened. I put it on speakerphone and he didn't know what to say. And I was like, hey, look, when you want to get some real money, call me back. He never called back. I was hoping he would. Um, but I like to have fun with them sometimes.
Yep, I was about to say who they were. A relative of mine likes to have fun with them, but I'm always
Yep.
telling my relative, I you got to be careful that you don't
Yeah.
inadvertently tell them something. Like
Yes.
in your attempts to have fun with them, you don't want to tell them any real information that they could then, it's just one more piece of information that they could use to legitimately scam you at some point in the future.
Yeah. I don't advise people to do that. It's just because I've dealt with this so much, I kind of know. But yeah, I definitely don't advise people to do it. I've seen the AI as a part of it.
Yeah.
Um, I think I had my first like true where I was able to tell the voice was completely like an AI assistant or something because it started to sound really robotic, but it was actually really good at responding when I was, asking the random questions that I asked. And it wasn't until the point where I actually asked the caller, "Are you real?" And it was a long pause. And then there was a really weird laugh, like it said, like, "Oh, of course I'm real," and it sounded like a laugh out of a horror movie,
Yeah.
that a robot would make. So, so that got interesting.
Yeah, I've had one or two that were definitely AI, but they were surprisingly good. I was in the beginning, I'm like, I think this is a real person. But what got me to feel good that it wasn't a real person, or at least that it was like pre-recorded auto responses, was that the call center background noise always
Oh,
always started at exactly the same time. So
Hmm.
always like let's say 5 seconds into the response, somebody would laugh in the background, or
Oh,
you'd hear exactly the same chatter. So it's they took the response and always put the same beginning of the same background noise in it, so you could hear that laugh just happened over and over and over in the
over.
background. It's like, oh, this is an AI. So I started playing around with it, trying to get weird responses out of it as well. Then
Yeah.
it finally got mad at me and hung up on me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to ask you from the victim side. I know I have interviewed a number of victims and in talking with lots of people in this space, uh, that the number of people that report the crimes happening is really low. Um, and so any numbers that we hear on fraud are probably significantly underrepresented. What are some of the challenges that you've had in dealing with victims and getting them to report? I know there's the aspect of shame and humiliation that just
Mhm.
like, oh, I can't believe I fell for it, and so therefore I don't want to come forward. How do you as an investigator help people to feel comfortable enough to talk about what happened?
Well, the first thing I try to do is help them understand that they're not alone in this and that fraud is such a big world. And hey, I tell them like this happens to everyone. And I relate to them and say, look, I've been a victim of fraud. If anybody who tells you they haven't been a victim of fraud to some extent, they're lying.
Yeah.
And so, and it's not saying that because you're a victim that you got tricked. It could have been, a result of a data breach or something like that where your information was just compromised.
Yeah.
And so I try to put them at ease to let them know, like, look, you're not alone. I'm going to help you through this process. Sometimes it may be a little longer than you like. You can't guarantee that that your money lost is, going to you're going to get that back. But I also like to let them know, like, the biggest thing is information and the education part of it, because a lot of victims, when I talk to them, they don't understand that one, how it happened,
Mm-hmm.
or they don't know that it could happen at all. And it's not oh, I'm the greatest person, it'll never happen to me. It's just, oh, I had no understanding that that could happen to anyone.
Yeah.
Like the text messages or the phone calls. And like I mentioned earlier with the phone number spoofing. And people don't know that there's technology out there and it's been around for a while that could show a different phone number. And like, wait, that's possible? Yeah, that's absolutely possible. And it happens all the time.
Yeah.
The text messages, tell them, hey, I get those messages all the time. They look very good. And with AI and bots and things like that, they become even better because now someone can write out an entire email and it looks very legitimate, or a text message and there's no grammar problems in it. And it also depends on the type of fraud that they dealt with. So some are more emotional than others. Take, for instance, we just had Valentine's Day
Mm-hmm.
and romance scams. They are very emotionally taxing when it comes to, and victims, when they fall for those scams, they really don't want to talk about it
Yeah.
because more, they feel more ashamed and embarrassed than anything else. And it explains to them like, hey, it's not your fault. Like in the same way that they have their profession as whatever they may work in, the same way I'm a detective. And like those scammers study it. That's what they do for a living, and they're very good at it. It's a psychological thing.
Yeah.
And so it's just helping them understand that. And then just explaining to them like, hey, look, it happens everywhere, but most of them go unreported because of those reasons. I would say for the most part, if you took any stat when it comes to fraud, you can probably double or triple it in some instances on the amount of actual fraud that's actually occurring. Like, I mean, I know this month, I'm waiting for the new stats to come out this month. I'm like a nerd when it comes to the stats for everything. And I know like the FTC puts out their stats every year, and it's usually around this time in February. So I'm like waiting for the new stats to come out because I know the numbers have increased. I
Yeah.
know like last year in 2023, I think total fraud in the US was $10 billion reportedly. So I know the FBI stats were like between 10 and $12 billion. And I guarantee it's more around 20 to $30 million that was actually lost.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just helping them understand that they're not alone in this process. And then afterwards teaching them like, hey, here's what you can do to prepare or to protect yourself in the future. Don't let it happen again.
Yeah.
Here are some steps to take. And that's the important part.
And
But
is that what you're doing with fraud here? Was trying to educate people?
That is 100% what I'm doing with Fraud Hero. So the whole purpose of that was, as a detective, I would get these cases, and sometimes by the time that I got the case, it was too late. It was the money's gone, your identity's been stolen, someone's done something. And so about a year and a half ago, my wife and I was like, "Hey, there's got to be something else that we have to do about this." And I go, "Let's go into educating." One thing I get to do is I get to see a lot of scams before they hit the news, right?
Yeah.
And I go, I can use the knowledge that I acquire from dealing with these scams and educate people before they become a victim. And so with Fraud Hero, I was like, you know what? Let's teach people to basically be their own hero. And hey, here's the steps that you can take to protect your credit. And here's what you can do to protect your identity online as best you can. Here's how you can be safer with credit cards. Here's what to watch out for with these imposter scams and some red flags. And so been building out this whole process like, hey, here's a course on exactly what you need to not be a victim. And some people will say, well, Mark, why are you doing this business? Like, aren't you going to put yourself out of like your detective's job? I'm like, oh, yes, absolutely. That's the point. It was like my job should be diminished to some extent because I want to stop people from being a victim in the first place. And rather be trying to investigate it afterwards. Now, do I love being an investigator? I 100% love
Yeah.
it. But if I could reduce it, then that's even better for me. And it's a win in my book.
Yeah, I would be happy if I could shut down my podcast because there's just no new scams. There's nothing new happening. Everybody's safe. Chris, your podcast has to shut down. I would be perfectly happy if that were the case, but here I am 5 years later, and I feel like there's more topics every year. There's more topics than the previous year.
Yeah, and for me, like the biggest thing has always been just the lack of information. And we put out a lot of information like through fraud. I've dealt with a lot of people who are professionals in fraud, and we deal with a lot of similar cases and put
Mm.
out the same information. But it's just getting it out to as many people as possible is my goal.
Yeah,
Is the more people I can educate on and train on how to fight fraud from the beginning and how not to be a victim in the beginning, on the back end, it's going to help me so much more, or help just the world in general so
yeah,
much more because now, hey, you can't scam this person. Well, why not? Because they know what your scam is. So when they see that red flag, they're hanging up the phone. If there's someone texting them and saying, "Hey, you have fraud in your account," you're not clicking the link. You're going to
yeah,
go to your actual account and you're going to check it, or you're going to call the bank. You're going to look in the back of your credit card or debit card, call the bank, and then say, "Hey, I just got a phone call and someone said I had fraud on my account." Oh, no, we didn't call you, and there's no activity of fraud on your account. And just those little steps will help go a long way when it comes to, protecting them and protecting, and get rid of the scammers.
yep.
Once you get rid of the victim, the scammers have no one they can scam anymore.
I love it. I love it. I remember one time I got a call saying, "Hey, there's been fraud in your account," and I said, I said, are you okay if I call you back at the number on the back of the card?" And they were like, "Absolutely, that's what you should do." And I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
so they really are from my bank?" Because I know I need like I did try. I still hung up and called back, but I've had that interaction with a scammer before. They do anything they can to keep you on the phone instead of actually calling the number on at the back of the card.
Yeah, well, they don't want you to hang up the
Yeah,
phone because as soon as you hang up, then there's a chance that you're going to talk to a friend, you're going to call law enforcement, you're going to call your bank, and then they've lost you.
yeah.
I've seen some people on the phone for 3 hours
Oh,
before, and they're like, they were just so convincing. And I go, yeah, that's what they do. But that's not normal for someone to be on the phone with you for 3 hours trying to get you to buy gift cards or send a wire transfer or use
yeah,
crypto ATM.
yeah.
So it's just like those red flags. You just got to be aware of it.
So what are some of the kind of the low hanging fruit of things that people can do to reduce the chance of them becoming a victim of fraud?
So one of the first things I tell people, and especially when they become a victim of identity theft, is check your credit report.
Yeah,
I was shocked at how many people don't monitor and don't check it on a normal basis. So the first thing I say is either go to your bank because they give you a free one every year. You can go to certain websites and they will give you a copy of your credit report weekly now, to an extent.
wow.
So because it's become that bad. So that's the first thing I say is check your credit report if you've been a victim of identity theft. That way you know if there's more accounts on your name. The second thing is monitor your bank accounts. Set up bank alerts. I have a bank alert set up on every account that I have. I know every single transaction
Yep.
that I make. So if I get that text message or phone call, someone saying, "Hey, you're a fraud on your account," I go, "Well, I didn't get notification and my normal means that there was a transaction." So banking alerts is the same thing. Sign up for things like informed delivery
Yeah.
is another thing. And then using a digital wallet, I think is necessary for your credit cards and debit cards. It's just I've investigated enough credit card and debit card fraud that using your digital wallet, something like Apple Pay or Google Pay, I think there's most Samsung Pay, PayPal, they all
Yeah.
have these digital wallets. And adding your card to it is very simple. It's tap to pay. It doesn't utilize your actual card number when you use it, and it keeps your card number safe. And those are probably four of the things that I tell people. And then sometimes I'll send them like an entire list, depending on what it is. And I go, look, this is going to be tedious, but if you really want to protect yourself going forward, here's a list. You don't have to do it right now. But just take your time throughout, whenever you get time to sit down and go to these different websites. I could tell them, go to data broker websites and remove your information. Or if you want to pay a service and they can do it for you, but get as much information. But preventing fraud is like an ongoing
Yeah.
thing. It's not there's no one-stop shop. There's no one business or one service that can do it all. It's a combination of all of it. But it all starts with the person knowing what could happen and what could be done to order to protect themselves.
And I assume they can find those resources on your website.
Yep, if you go to fraudhero.com, you can find those resources that it explains, give you a free, I call it an action plan. You can download for free. It tells you, hey, here are the quick tips and tricks of what you can do to start protecting yourself now. I have an entire course that I have coming pretty soon, Fraud Hero Academy. So that'll be a course for everyone to be able to go in and be able to say, hey, here's an in-depth way of how you can protect yourself. And you can do it at your own time, your own pace. And then, of course, other resources like where to file a report.
Yeah.
So things like filing a report with the FBI at ic3.gov, or filing a report with the Federal Trade Commission at ftc.gov, or contacting your local department, contacting your bank. And those are probably the first four things you want to do too if you've been a victim.
Yeah.
FBI, FTC, your local department, and your bank. And make sure you do multiple. If you do just one, it could be, it's better to do it across the board than just to say, hey, I called my bank and I'm waiting for them to get done. No, call your bank and call your local police department to help out.
Does that help in working with banks if you say, "Hey, I filed a police report. Here's the case number." Does that kind of like show the bank a little bit more seriousness, or does
Yeah.
that make a difference? I don't know.
A lot of banks actually require you to file a police report because they want you to show that it's valid. And I know a lot of departments, I know mine, if you're a victim of identity theft, you can't just even make a report online. You actually have to go in person to prove you are who you are to make the report. So it makes it more legitimate because I don't see someone who's not been a victim of identity theft going to actually make a report
Yeah.
in person to say, hey, I've been a victim. But a lot of banks require it. It's just showing like, hey, law enforcement looking into it. They're probably expecting at some point to be contacted by law enforcement. And then when they do, like, oh, hey, we already flagged that account. I'm like, great. Um, and then that's when the relationship between law enforcement and the banks come in handy because now you have this. I have a lot of networking friends who work in banks and they go, hey,
Mhm.
look, I got this case I'm working. I think one of your accounts is being, one of your account holders is being victimized. And, I want to make you also look good as
Yeah.
well and say, hey, you're going to help them. You're going to work with us. We're going to help them and we're going to stop them from not only victimizing the person, but also from victimizing the bank.
I love it. I love it that you've taken what is your daytime job and made it into a night and weekend passion as well.
Oh yeah, I've had some long nights, a lot of coffee. So
I can imagine. Any parting advice before we wrap up the episode here?
uh just I make sure everyone stay vigilant. You can't stop what you don't know. He said that the best thing to do is to educate yourself first and then reach out, make those contacts. Don't be afraid to share what's happened to you because you're not the only person this happened to.
Yeah.
It happens to millions of people all around the world, billions of people probably all around the world. Um, so don't feel like you're alone in this and don't be afraid to come forward and just talk about what happened to you because what you share could help somebody else not be a victim of the same thing you may have experienced.
Awesome. Mark, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it.